So here we are at the end of my game of the Pacific Theatre, the Second World War. You can see the situation here. We have Japan, we have Iwo Jima here, we have Saipan here and Guam here. Just down here we have the Carolines. I better just show you the situation there. And you can see it's all hotly contested. So, for example, the Japanese kept these islands, the Americans took these, and they were trying to inch forward. The Japanese ended up still holding Guam, and they did a last season amphibious attack to try and retake Saipan. The Americans were holding it. They had a strategic bomber and a nuclear bomb base there. They had their other strategic bomber and nuclear bomb base there, their long-range bombers. And the Japanese, they have task force here. And the Americans, 2 task forces here. This one's actually an allied one with an Australian destroyer unit. So you see that all the main effort was concentrated around this island. The Americans successfully dropped an atom bomb on Sendai up here, and the Japanese survived their morale roll as the result of that. And so it was all down to the second atom bomb. The Americans only have 2 at most to drop, and they didn't make it because essentially the Japanese had managed to flip the strategic bomber, so it had to fly in the last season. It flipped, and it was knocked out by the Japanese air umbrella, which they still had remaining. So the Japanese actually survived and won this game. Now, it was hotly contested. You can see how it went down very close to the wire. And the Soviets were helping out. They put their air here, so they were constantly attriting the Japanese air cover there. Meanwhile, the Soviets were retaking stuff in Manchuria. They retook Korea, they retook East China, and they were about to take Maoist China, and they were then moving on nationalist China. The Indians forces from the Commonwealth were up here, and the Commonwealth was slowly retaking everything around here. But the game ended in spring 1945 with the Japanese still in control of the Philippines. They had a small fleet there that's just had its carrier force knocked out by the Australian Air Force as they're preparing for amphibious invasion there. The Japanese still controlled Singapore, and Hainan took Hong Kong. Actually, late in the game, that stayed Commonwealth until 1945. They just took it as an airbase as they were retreating back. So it's an exciting game all the way through, and here's the situation in the other theatre commitment pool. Every single unit is flipped, and there's 1 spare unit. If they'd taken 2 more losses, then the Allies would not have had enough commitment in the other theatre and would have lost the game in that sense. So it was really tough because in 1944 you need 50 units in the other theatre commitment pool. In 1945 you need 70. So in a year the Allies had to denude so many of their forces. They had so many Air Force units here, and they just had to send them all off over to the European theatre. But they did have a little bit of help in the last year. The Soviets came in. I didn't check the rules, but I think the Soviets are non-cooperating allies, which means they could not. The Soviets don't actually have. Oh no, they did actually have a sea transport. So the Soviets could have tried an invasion of Japan, and I didn't attempt that. I thought it was probably historically unlikely. I was considering it because it would really have assisted the Allies, perhaps if they had done that, not bothered concentrating on retaking gains there, because really that was very much sideshow. The Japanese had so many resources at this point in the game that even though the Allies were taking them quite quickly, it wasn't going to make enough of a dent in the long run, because there wasn't a long run for it to make a dent in. So essentially the Japanese won by maintaining this heavy air umbrella and even a fleet of CVs. They got 2 CV units left, having lost all their rest. The Americans have been losing loads. Essentially because of the Japanese air umbrella, they were just... this game is great because it really gives you a sense of the Pacific operations, whereby you need to take islands for air bases. To take an island, you really need air cover, especially if the island's got air cover itself. You can send in carriers with air units to assist with that, but then the enemy may have submarines in the water, and that can take out a carrier. It's only on a lucky hit that you ever, as long as you're careful with the placing of your units, you don't just have lone, say, carrier units. You normally only take 1 hit, and 2 hits. You can take 2 hits. Very rare to take 3 or more hits in a combat, and the attacker chooses the first, the defender the second. So the attacker will always choose, say, with a submarine to hit the CV. If you roll a 6 there, you can get a double hit, and with that you get the chance to sink a unit outright. Otherwise the navies are slowly attrited down, and so you get the wonderful sense of the combination of how island hopping works with the combined forces, the submarines, the navy, the Air Force, the Marines and the infantry, all working together, along with the headquarters supply units as well. And the US had a hard time of it because of the other theatre commitment. In 1943, beginning of 1944, they were looking great. They had loads of air, loads of infantry here. And then during that year, they just had to send them all away, so they ended up with very minimal. Now, the Japanese one, I did make some mistakes, like, for instance, I forgot about adjusting when the Netherlands, East Indies joined the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth should have, when Japan attacked the East Indies, the Commonwealth should have gained their resource points, which I forgot about. I don't think it would have made a huge difference because the Commonwealth never had that many units to activate anyway, so they would have had surplus resources they never needed. But it could have made a small difference in certain areas, and how those small differences can create a snowball effect. So I'm kind of satisfied with the result because it came down to the wire. I think it could have gone either way, and because of those slight odd mistakes I've made along the way, that could, I think favoured the Japanese more than the Americans, more than the Allies. I can't be too fast with surety on that, but that's just the sense I got from my vague memory of the mistakes I made along the way. But the point is, I'm very satisfied with the result. It could have gone either way, and so it was a hard fought fight. It wasn't a pushover for the Allies, and it wasn't a dead cert for the Japanese. This game, I think, is a wonderful game. It gives you that whole sense of the war, particularly in this theatre. I haven't tried the European theatre yet. My only reservation with the game is it needs a supplement, a rules supplement, in the sense that the rules are fine as they are. There are some things that are missing, but you can figure it out and house rule it. But the basic engine is wonderful. What it needs, though, is a supplement of, say, 4 pages, and on one page it has everything to do with air, all collated. On the next page it has everything to do with naval forces, everything you could possibly want, all collated. Next, supply and control of hexes, and what happens when everything to do with supply, essentially, because it's all there in the rules, but it's not referenced at all. It has an index, but index is essentially it has a table of contents. It doesn't have an index. Tables of contents essentially useless. It sets at the beginning of the rule, but you need an index. But really, with rules referencing throughout, it could do with case numbering to find. So you're not looking through a paragraph. You can dive straight to a particular sentence. But beyond that, just don't worry. Leave the rules as they are, and put a supplement that collates everything together, because that was the problem. Even with referencing it, I'd be flipping back and forth through the book a lot. Just put it all on one page. In everything to do with the subject, present that as a supplement, and so many war games would benefit from that. It's fine to have player aids, but you can see I massively annotate them, and I used Chris Hayes thing that I even annotated his. It wasn't enough on it for me, and it's just because I'm trying to do that thing that I'm asking for with these rule summaries. So it's not a criticism of this game alone, almost every single war game, but I don't want that. So I'm just saying that as a caveat, in that although this game is simple, it has a wonderful engine, it works really well, it's complicated because there's many moving parts. They're all simple, but there's many parts, and because of that you really need hyper clarified player aids, and enough of them. For example, do that, stick that on a page with everything else that is relevant to the navies. I mentioned that in a previous video. So I think I don't really have much more to say. You can see the final losses that were never attempted to be rebuilt in the last year and a half, and you can see how the Soviets were helping quite a lot with control of countries, taking them back over from the Japanese. But it's taken a long time to play, although I would say you can get, at this point, in one map, you can get a whole season played out in a year. That's 3 impulses, so that's about 20 minutes per impulse for 3 different players, and at the end 4 different players with the Soviets. It's very quick to do them. But so if we say an hour for a season, we've got 4 seasons for 4 years, so that's 12 hours, and then last year 13 hours, 14 for setup. That's 14-hour game. I've definitely played it for longer than that, looking at rules and stuff like that and chatting on videos. But so it's great. It really gives you it's time well spent with this game, and I hope it's been an interesting little series to look at, for some people to get some precarious experience of a lesser known game, and it's on sale from One Small Step. I urge you to get it. Join the Consumer World group, check out extra player aids, and if something like this is your cup of tea, there you go. Okay, so I don't know what my next... Oh yes, I do know what my next game is going to be. It's going to be Napoleon at Austerlitz, an old game by 3W. So it's a tactical. It's going to be a nice brief respite from this monster effort by originally Pan Genre and John Power. Thanks a lot. Over and out.